Hayom Harat Olam. Today, the world is born anew. And so we start from the beginning of all beginnings. According to the great story of creation, God made each thing with its companion. The light had the dark, the sea had the sky, the sun ruled by day and the moon by night. Plants and animals teemed in their vast numbers, filling the earth, air, and seas. And then God began the final project, the creation of humankind, drawing from the rich red clay of the ground, the Adamah. The Holy One molded and shaped and breathed a breath of life into the Adam, the very first man who was formed and was given the garden to till and to tend. Everything created until this point had been pronounced good, but this creature was especially blessed as Tov Me'od, very good indeed. And yet, something wasn't right. There was a flaw in the grand plan. God looked around and declared, Lo tov heyot Adam levado. It is not good for the Adam creature to be all alone. Coincidentally, it is not good for the Adam creature to be all alone are my wife's exact words whenever she goes out of town and comes back to find our house in utter shambles. Loneliness, the Torah says, is the very first bad thing in creation. And by most measures, the problem has only gotten worse. On the one hand, we are the most connected beings in all of history. It was with stunning speed that the communication and transportation revolutions of the past 2 centuries completely remade our capacity to be with one another. Consider that if all of the human story were compressed into one single 24-hour day, the telegraph would only have come into existence at 11:15 p.m. The telephone at 11:25, the commercial flight 11:45, the World Wide Web at 11:53, and our indispensable smartphones at 3 minutes to midnight. Unimagine less than 2 decades ago, the largest social network, Facebook, has 2.9 billion users every month. More than 1/3 of all human beings alive on the planet participate in Mr. Zuckerberg's virtual dystopia. If we add all of the social media platforms linking us together, the number skyrockets to 5 billion monthly users, all sharing the details of our lives, at least the details we're willing to share, in countless words and images. Of course, over the past few years, we've only accelerated the technologies meant to bring us into each other's homes and to render physical distance irrelevant. When I left the Introduction to Judaism program that I ran for the last decade, we had students participating in class together from 17 different countries, including an Australian school teacher, a Japanese physical therapist, an Irish law student, and a German actor whose grandfather had been a Nazi tank commander. Today's service will be watched by many more people than fit even in this big room. And in 2020, a crowd of 5,000 people listened to Kol Nidre chanted from this bima, all without a single soul sitting in the seats. In theory, we have never been woven together more tightly, yet the garment of our connection feels threadbare and worn. We've never been more connected and never more lonely. For several years now, loneliness has been described as a worldwide epidemic with manifold consequences to our mental, spiritual, even physical health. Major studies in 2019 reported that most adult men have fewer than 3 people with whom they feel they can speak openly, and that more than a quarter of millennials say that they don't have a single person they consider a truly close friend in real life. UCSF reported that nearly half of American seniors feel lonely most of the time, and correlates loneliness with a 45% increase in elder mortality and a 60% increase in cognitive decline. Overall, the CDC says that chronic loneliness has roughly the same health consequences as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day and twice that of obesity, and directly correlates with rates of self-harming behavior, including suicide, which among teens in particular has skyrocketed to levels not seen in the last many decades. Of course, social scientists are just now beginning to quantify the effects of the unprecedented isolation of the last 2.5 years. And it's important to remember that while most of us here in this room have returned to more or less our daily routines, there remains a significant portion of our community who are still largely isolated without a clear end in sight. Lo tov heyot adam levado. It's not good for human beings to be all on our own. And yet we have spent so very much time, so very alone. It was against this backdrop that last Rosh Hashanah, I started to think about making one of the biggest decisions of my personal and professional life: to leave the university position that I had held for a decade and do this: enter into the congregational rabbinate. When I started to share the news, reactions ranged from a cautious yasher koach to deep incredulity, particularly from my fellow rabbis. "Do you have any idea what it's been like?" they said to me. Even the CBI search committee expressed its doubts, asking me so many times, in so many ways, if I really knew what I was getting myself in for, that I started to wonder whether you wanted to fill the position. The truth is, I am here at CBI not in spite of the challenges of our times, but precisely because of them. If there is one thing that I have learned over the past few years, it's to take the medicine when offered. And spiritual community is the most potent vaccine against our modern plagues. In an era of isolation, fragmentation, and polarization, it is a matter of pikuach nefesh, of saving our very souls to choose to enmesh our lives with one another, to decide to share life's pain and joy with a collection of beloveds and strangers, to resist the urge to separate from one another, and instead stand as family by choice, in which we are known and seen, and where our presence deeply matters. I'm here because I'm hungry for community, for myself, for my family, and most of all, for my little girl. You know, Grace was 8 months old when we retreated into our home to wait for the COVID storm to pass. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? As nervous new parents, we had just started to get comfortable with the idea of asking someone to hold her for a moment. And then, overnight, her world shrank to just the 2 of us. Those long months of isolation reinforced for me just how profoundly I want her to grow up, surrounded by a whole big tribe of aunts and uncles and stand-in grandparents and friends who feel like family. And I know I'm not alone in that hunger. At whatever stage of life we find ourselves, one thing is true for us all: we can't do it alone. And so I believe there is no time in modern history when synagogues have been more important. In the Psalm for the High Holy Day season, the psalmist asked God for the privilege to dwell in the sanctuary all the days of his life. As my friend, the newly appointed head of the Los Angeles Jewish Federation, Rabbi Noah Farkas, points out, there is no other institution in either Jewish or secular life, aside from the synagogue, that can truly claim to be a place of gathering for all of life's moments and seasons. A place where young children and elders, singles and couples, those celebrating new love, and those in the deep, dark night of grief can all make home together for the long haul. Over the past 40 years, this sacred house has been the anchor for generations of families. As one third-generation CBI teenager recently told me, half-heartedly complaining, but I also think more than a little bit proud, we just get in the car, and I think it drives itself here. Kid, I know the feeling. I consider it a tremendous privilege to be your partner in meeting this moment in the life of CBI. I am profoundly grateful to have the opportunity to build what comes next on such a strong foundation. Most of the people who first dreamt up this congregation, who scribbled its plans on the back of napkins and sat around kitchen tables, birthing their vision into reality, are still sitting with us, thank God, in this room. Over the decades, this community has celebrated some great joys and mourned some unimaginable tragedies. This bima has been host to giants, and for the last 3.5 decades, you've been led by a man I'm proud to call my teacher, Rabbi Eli Spitz, one of the finest rabbis that I know. Olam chesed yibaneh, the psalmist sang. Worlds are built from great love. And this community sure has been. And so it's on that solid bedrock that we now have a tremendous opportunity to renew our future. Every day that I come to work over the past 2.5 months, I have sensed the undeniable energy of a community on the rise. I see it in the overflowing courtyard at Shabbat under the stars, each one 50 people greater than the one before. I sense it in people's excitement to greet each other during services, full of laughter and the delight of connecting to old and new friends. I feel it especially when interacting with our kids, dancing each week with our little preschoolers at our Havdalah gatherings, celebrating Shabbat with 120 Camp B'nai Ruach campers packed into a tight circle of U.S. wires, filling a living room with your Ruach. I hear it in the sweet and soulful sounds of Cantor Amy's davening, and I must say, I don't know where she is in the room, there is no clergy partner I could be more excited to share the bima with. This is the spirit of a place that is shaking off the dust of years of pandemic and transition, now ready to open a new chapter of communal renaissance, to build for the next 40 years and the 40 after that. And while I certainly hope that all our efforts will lead to a growing community, and I'm proud to share that we have added nearly 40 families just since July, I don't think that numbers ought to be our first priority. There is much more urgent work than that. Since July, I have met with at least one CBI member every single day to hear your stories and dreams for this community. Many days I've talked to 6 or more. When I ask what makes CBI special, nearly all of you have spoken about relationships, about good-hearted people, about sweet souls who have walked the long road with you for many years. And I also, in those conversations, hear such longing, a sense that the past years of distance have strained some of those connections, that people know each other less well than they once did, that those who've come to join us in recent years have not yet had the chance to find their place and their people as their elders had. And so I believe our most fundamental duty is to attend to this family. We need to renew our bonds of affection with one another. And my most important priority in my first year as your rabbi is to ensure that everyone, without exception, knows that they matter to this community's vitality. That means our youngest families and our most senior elders, our teens, our singles, those who practically live in this building and those who haven't set foot through these doors in a long time. That everyone counts, that everyone is needed. It's said that the Jewish people can be compared to the letters of the Torah scroll. Absent even a single letter, the entire Sefer Torah becomes pasul, ritually unfit for use, until that letter has been restored to its rightful place. There are no insignificant markings in our Torah, and there are no insignificant people in our community. All of them, all of you matter. And we have to put in the effort, each and every one of us, to ensure that we all know it. I can't wait to continue working with CBI's board and staff, and we have amazing leaders in this community, to create more opportunities to invite us back into deeper relationship with one another. In particular, to ask ourselves how we can make sure that we truly have each other's backs through life's storms, ensuring that members facing grief and illness and isolation are shown the kind of steadfast love that it takes to heal. I'm similarly excited for us to come together in service of others, of refugees, the poor and the vulnerable in our neighborhoods, because it's in living out our highest values together that we remind ourselves of our purpose and mission. And I'm proud to share that this week CBI finalized the formation of a welcome circle to adopt a refugee family as our own, to help them to settle here in our community. And at the center, I believe at the center of the many spokes of the wheel that make up our community, we have a responsibility to build up our Shabbat experience into a glorious weekly family reunion. Every week should feel like an event, a happening, a not-to-be-missed opportunity where anyone, at any point in your Jewish journey, schlepping whatever religious baggage you happen to carry, can gather with friends for whom the experience would simply not be the same without them. And all of that's just the beginning of what's possible for us. The story is told of Rabbi Yochanan, who went to visit Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who had fallen seriously ill. Rabbi Yochanan possessed an extraordinary power, a capacity for miraculous healing with only the touch of his hands. He entered Rabbi Chia's room and asked, "Do you desire your suffering?" "Neither it nor its reward," replied the sick man. And then Rabbi Yochanan extended his hand to his fellow and lifted him up to health. Sometime later, Rabbi Yochanan was now sick, and another healer, Rabbi Hanina, went to see him. "Do you desire your suffering?" he asked. "Neither it nor its reward," replied Yochanan. And Hanina extended his hand and lifted up his friend. At this, the narrator of the story pauses to ask the obvious question. Rabbi Yochanan had the magic at his fingertips, the capacity with a single touch to restore vitality and overcome disease. Why could he not simply heal himself? And they answer, a prisoner cannot set themselves free from jail. The bottom line is this: we need each other. Life is too hard to go it alone. And here's the good news: you're already here. You have a community of people around you who are ready to take your hand and eager to offer you their own as we build together. And so I say to our newcomers, welcome to this wonderful, wonderful family. And to our stalwarts, thank you for being the solid backbone and the firm foundation that got us to this point. To those who have felt disconnected, welcome back. You've been missed. It's so wonderful to have you with us. And to those who wonder amidst all this change, if this is still your place, I say, time may spin forward, but you can never lose your home here. New and old together, we extend our hands to one another as Am Echad im Lev Echad, as one people with one heart, because we belong together. I close with the words of Gwendolyn Brooks, the first female African-American poet to win the Pulitzer Prize, who wrote the following lines: "We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond." These words have been with me all this past year, through the personal roller coaster of deciding to leave a job I had built and that I loved, to facing the vulnerability of putting myself out to congregations, will they like me? To selling our home and moving our family, to beginning this new chapter here with you. They perfectly capture the kind of community that I most need to make manifest for myself and for our daughter. A place where we see and are seen. A place where we care and are cared for. Where we take delight in one another and responsibility for each other. Where we rise as one. I know that we've found that here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'achianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. I thank the one and only for the gift of this life, for bringing us all together to this place and moment. We have such great work to do together. We have such joyful times ahead. Shana Tova.